This 747 Jumbo is on its last flight. Over the past 24 years, it has flown enough to circle the world 1,200 times. With its bodywork strained by so many flights, the plane is too old and expensive to maintain. Its final destination is the desert tarmac in Goodyear, Arizona. This is the home of Aero Turbine, a company that specializes in aircraft mechanics.
Let's go ahead and prep these, get everything set up, loosened up.
Roger Hodges is the maintenance manager. Usually he repairs aircraft.
It's worth more dead than alive.
So basically,
This jet is now beyond repair, but parts of it are still fit to use. Rather than trash it, Roger will make sure it's carefully pulled apart piece by piece.
Just like cars or anything else aren't going to last forever. There's still many parts within the airframe and engines that are worth sending to overhaul. 30% of this airplane will be utilized in future 747s.
The Jumbo's parts are still usable because the plane's basic design has changed little since its first commercial flight in 1970. Back then, it took several hundred people and 4 months to make a plane. Now, just a handful of mechanics will attempt to tear one apart in only 12 weeks. Among them, Derek Pfeiffer, who runs the crew from the ground.
We'll get in there with a ratchet and a socket and get them out.
Derek and the rest of the team are all experts in aircraft mechanics. But none of them have pulled apart an aircraft on this scale.
The Boeing 747 is the biggest aircraft we had to tear down so far. All right, you ready?
It's by far maybe the biggest challenge.
It's just huge. We don't want to damage it. We don't want to get hurt.
Everything they do will be a learning experience. They must rely heavily on the manuals that were used to build this plane more than 2 decades ago.
Big parts, everything's like 4 to 5 times heavier than we're accustomed to. Takes tooling, takes slings to be able to handle that kind of weight.
It'll be a 4-step process. First, workers must gently remove the engines. 4 jet engines of massive weight are to be carefully taken down. Second, they must extract any items that can be resold, from piping to coffee makers.
65 Bravo, 94.
All can be reused on other aircraft. Next, they must remove hazardous material like depleted uranium and take it to a safe location. Workers will also strip and destroy anything else of little value, like worn seat covers and insulation. Finally, they must crush the remaining metal so it can be melted into solid bars of aluminium, and from there made into new products like electronics, tools and furniture. The aim is to recycle an incredible 98% of the aircraft and reclaim spare parts and scrap worth about £3.4 million. The team starts by detaching the biggest and most valuable items, the 4 engines, each weighing 4.8 tons. A new engine can cost £2.5 million, but a second-hand engine costs around $750,000, and there's already a buyer awaiting the ones from this 747.
This particular airplane, it arrived, the engines were sold when it came here. So of course that was the first thing. They're in high demand.
The new owner wants the engines ready for reuse without delay.
We just try to do it, in a timely manner, and just as long as everybody's safe.
But the team are against the clock. On a 747, 2 engines are mounted under each wing. In flight, they power the 747 to speeds upward of 500 miles an hour.
We start loosening up the bolts.
Each jet engine has 2 systems that need to be dismantled.
Okay, come down.
At lower altitudes, where the air is thicker, the engine uses a turbofan system. But at high altitudes, the air is too thin for the fans to work alone. A core compressor takes over. This sucks air into the opening and compresses it, so it's under pressure, like the air that blows up car tires. The compressed air then mixes with the fuel and ignites to create the combustion that propels the airplane. The mechanics must disconnect both systems in each engine and lower them all in one piece, and they must do it quickly for the new owner. They clip 16 electrical connectors, detach 3 hydraulic lines,
10-4, thank you.
cap the main fuel supply, and undo 375 fasteners. One wrong move, and someone could be killed. No one understands that more than mechanic Dean Klepper.
Well, if it comes forward, it might come forward.
It's very dangerous work. Aircraft shift can knock you over. When you're running engines, you can be sucked in, blown over. The industry is very dangerous.
Dean's brother was also an aircraft mechanic. In 2003, Rick Klepper was crushed when an engine slipped from a forklift truck.
The motor all disconnected. They were backing the engine away on a forklift. Cable got hung up. The engine put a little tension on the cable. The forklift swung the engine forward, pinned my brother against the aircraft. It ruptured his heart and one lung, and he died right on the spot.
Dean keeps a picture of Rick on the back of his ID badge, a close reminder for everyone to watch their back.
Whenever I get a job, I look at it from the safety aspect first and then look at it from the job aspect second. The biggest thing is we watch each other's back, and we try our hardest to keep each other out of harm's way.
It takes 3 mechanics about 4 hours to prepare an engine for removal.
So hold on, Howard, loosen up a little bit.
They hook up the hoist kit to support the first engine.
Howard, I'm gonna pull down a little bit, all right? So hold on, Howard. Loosen up a little bit. The front.
Yeah.
With time against them, the team are going to have to work through the hottest part of the day.
This heat is draining and just draining us.
But they must keep their concentration. A swinging 4.8-ton engine could cause disaster. Scrapping an aging 747 jumbo jet is a huge technical challenge. This team in Arizona have never before taken apart such a big plane. It is also extremely dangerous work. Getting a 747's engine safely to the ground requires a team effort.
Howard, I'm gonna pull down a little bit, all right? All right, Howard, that'll work. All right, now hold up. 44, that's about good.
Just come down a little bit.
The mouth of each engine is nearly 3 meters across.
These engines weigh like 11,500 pounds.
These tailor-made slings will catch and cradle the nearly 5-ton machines to ensure neither the engines nor the crew are damaged in the process.
We want the chain falls even, so when we get ready to come down with the engine don't try to swing on us.
Okay.
Where you at?
Finally, they gently lower the first engine. It takes 150 man-hours for the mechanics to remove all the engines, but it's well worth it. The 4 engines will have a sell-on value of £3 million. Before removing anything more from the aircraft, there is a critical job that needs to be done. Inside each 747 wing sit 2 main fuel tanks and a reserve tank. Each wing can hold 64,000 litres of fuel. The tank under the seats holds another 64,000 litres. If the tanks aren't dry by the time workers demolish the fuselage, there could be a massive explosion. Stephen Collins is specially trained for defueling aircraft.
Yeah, all these airplanes that come in, we recycle all the fuel that comes off of them.
But there's a problem.
Yeah, this is what I thought. This particular aircraft is an older aircraft, so it has a defuel tin on it.
Unfamiliar with 747s, Stephen hadn't seen a safety latch. The smallest items can create big problems, but with this one fixed, the fuel is extracted. And there are many more parts of the aircraft that, if carefully removed, can be recycled. Even the smallest of components can be resold. Throughout the plane are electronic instruments and the wires that connect them. Until this point, the plane has been operating on its own power. Now, that power must be shut off so the electronics can be safely removed. It's a major step in the scrapping of the aircraft.
We're gonna kill power.
No power means no air conditioning for the crew working in the confined spaces of the aircraft. Inside a sweltering cockpit, Dane Zimmerman must remove more than 100 instruments. They're extremely fragile and must be taken out early on to reduce the chance of accidental damage. Most, if not all of these gauges will be recalibrated and sold. They'll still work on newer 747s and other aircraft. But as the temperature rises to 110 degrees outside, Dane struggles as the cabin heats up. Teardowns normally take place in the hangar. But this 747 is too huge to fit through the hangar doors. The plane must stay out and the crew must work in the heat. Outside, mechanics start to unscrew, unhook and unfasten this 747, piece by piece. But soon, it's like pulling apart a furnace. To beat the sun, the crew arrives at 5 AM, but there's little relief, even at this hour. The scorching heat makes the metal hot to touch and dangerous to work with. The cabin becomes an oven. Dane battles against the heat to remove this old jumbo's cockpit gauges. On the second-hand market, they'll fetch over £35,000. These cockpit instruments sit in a location unique among aircraft. The upstairs cabin. The 747 is the only passenger plane to have one. The aircraft can hold 175 cubic meters of cargo, or with seats, 452 passengers. In the 1970s, Boeing took the marketing of this spacious interior to new heights.
The Harlem Globetrotters would like to show you what the Boeing 747 is really all about. So welcome aboard. The biggest, most luxurious plane in the sky, the 747, where you can move around with all the freedom in the world. Space like you've never known before. Headroom, legroom, elbow room.
A plane with an upstairs captured the public imagination.
You'll have a ball. Boeing. Getting people together.
And of course, home to the highest cockpit mechanic Dane Zimmerman has ever tackled. The cockpit instruments were positioned for the pilots to use. Now they're easy for Dane to reach and remove. But there are delicate and valuable instruments throughout the plane that need taking out. The plane's flight recorder and cockpit voice recorder, or the black boxes, have their own special location. These boxes record flight information and the pilot's voice to help those investigating any problems. They sit above the passenger's cabin in the back of the aircraft. A section engineers have deemed more likely to survive a major accident. Surprisingly, the so-called black boxes aren't black.
These are the infamous black boxes. As you can see, they're painted orange, which is always kind of funny. But the reason for the color is so they can be found if an aircraft crashes.
The term black box comes from the general term for the plane's electronic boxes. All the others are black. But these boxes are only a minute fraction of what needs to be scrapped within the aircraft. Among what is left to be salvaged, 5 miles of tubing, 170 miles of wiring, and 3 million fasteners. Much of which can be found here, within the underside of the aircraft. Hatches provide access to 4 spaces, each the size of a van, crammed with pipes and ducts. The mechanics know that anything might have value.
That's a big business. Just about every part that comes off an aircraft, just about every part can be refurbished and re-put on another aircraft.
From complex electronics to ducting, flight controls to hydraulic tubing, even the most commonplace items can have real value.
There's certain parts you might look at sitting on a shelf and say, who would ever want that and whatnot, but the fact that it come off of an aircraft, it has a value to it. Here's a coffee maker that's removed, and it's obviously seen better days. They will keep these things on the shelf with a fresh tag because coffee makers go out quite often. And there's nothing worse that a flight attendant hates than their coffee makers and their ovens and whatnot aren't working.
John's coffee maker could go for upward of £1,000. Parts that are regularly damaged are in high demand. That includes one of the most valuable sections on the Jumbo, its nose. The tip of the nose is called the radome. Each radome is specially made to protect the aircraft's weather radar. The antennae inside communicates weather systems to the pilot. It must withstand regular wind blasts over 500 miles an hour, faster than any hurricane. A used nose, in good condition, is a valuable part of any jet. But to remove the radome, mechanics must climb up high, 3 stories up.
There's nothing on a 407 you can reach without a lift, some type of swing, lifting apparatus to get it off.
The nose is built to stick. Loosening each bolt around the cone is an awkward and tedious process. Opening this massive cowl requires yet another lift and a 3rd crew member. A fall from this height could be fatal, so everyone is strapped in.
You're tied off in there, but it's not stable. It does move around. You think something's falling and you automatically, it's just a little nerve-wracking at times. A lot of people can't take that. Don't like the height. I'm not real crazy about it myself.
The team have to keep their calm and their balance as they attempt to remove the nose cone. But there are other dangers lurking within the plane.
Get pretty serious.
A store of depleted uranium. And the really big work hasn't even begun. In the heat of the Arizona desert, a team of mechanics are taking apart a 747. One of the trickiest jobs is the removal of the nose cone, while carefully balanced 30 feet up.
Good to go, though.
After a team effort, the nose opens, revealing the aircraft's weather radar, a valuable item. The antenna heads for the warehouse, and the team heads back up to finish the toughest part of the nose job, removing the cover entirely. The radome weighs 90 kilograms and measures about 2 meters across. To remove it, they must work as a team.
It's just rotating. Yeah, it's just rotating. It's just bring it to me. You guys ready?
Together, they bring it down safely.
Yep. Hold on the side.
Good teamwork. Everybody talked, communicated. We got up there and got it down safely and got it off the mail up, and everything went pretty smooth. All right.
The nose cone can be resold for nearly £8,000. So far, mechanics pulling apart this old jumbo have gutted it of engines, antenna, nose cone and electronics. Hundreds of kilograms have been shed, and this work pays for itself. They've put around £3 million worth of parts back on the market. It's the first 747 they've ever tackled. But they know the real heavy lifting is about to begin. The wings of this 747 are massive structures, weighing over 20,000 kilograms each. You could park 22 medium-sized cars on the surface of just one. Operating the wings requires powerful machinery. The devices that control the flaps are precious components called actuators. The 747 has 10 actuators, 2 in each wing, 4 in the tail, and 2 in the rudder. They weigh up to 90 kilograms each and are among the largest pieces the crew must remove. It's a daunting and dangerous mission 3 stories above the ground. And these mechanics have never dealt with actuators this big.
Once again, 747 uses larger components, makes it harder to take everything out because it's bulkier.
The crew takes up position above and below a tail flap. To reach the actuator, they must first hoist up the flap. The problem is, it weighs 250 kilograms.
Okay, Howard.
Let her down, Howard. Are you gonna come back this way a ways?
I won't be able to hold it. Okay.
The team hustles to force the actuator out, but it won't budge.
Okay, Willie. Yeah. You need to help me hold this for a little bit. Hold on to the rope. Or can you hold it for a second?
Yeah. Someone must hold up the tail flap while the struggle continues. Brackets in the tail obstruct the actuator's path. They must somehow work around the brackets without damaging the actuator itself.
A little bit of roll in it.
You gotta do this out.
Yeah, you gotta come out about there. You all right? Hey, let's rest a little bit, okay?
They
reposition for a better angle under the tail.
Onto it. We're gonna go all the way up again. Okay, ready? Right there. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay.
Now we're gonna try it. Can you pull it up a little? Either way would work.
And continue the fight by working on their knees. Then, another serious setback. Lyle is sprayed by an airplane mechanic's worst nightmare, Skydroll.
Just got doused with Skydroll.
Skydroll is the hydraulic fluid that courses through the veins of the aircraft. It's a toxic sludge that burns and can temporarily blind.
Shortly it'll start burning. It's tough. And it won't stop until you clean it off.
Skydroll in the eyes is like getting pepper sprayed, but a whole lot worse.
The burn is too painful to work through.
Hey, Willie, you want to work on that? I got to put some Castrol on my face. It's starting to burn.
Bringing it up? Yeah.
Castor oil neutralizes Skydroll's burn, and it's back to work.
Got about 2 inches. Come on.
I'm gonna need help pushing it all the way up. Then I'll try to hold it.
With one last heave of the tail flap, they finally pry the 90-kilogram actuator free.
Be careful, Lyle. All right, Howard. Let it down a little.
Okay. Let it down, Howard. Well, that's done.
The grueling removal is a lesson learned for the next actuator, and the 8 more after that.
All right, Howard, you got it?
They remove the rest in half the time.
Okay. All right, down. We're down. Come on down. Hold on. All right.
Oh, yeah. Each large actuator is worth thousands of pounds. They remove 10 of them, for a total of roughly £40,000. But the biggest job lies ahead, dismantling the metal shell. The Jumbo now sits in full view of its fate. Across the way, an MD-80 gets crushed into scrap metal. All of its reusable parts have been salvaged, and anything left gets handed over to Julio Estrada from the Almeida Metals Scrapping Company. Julio's scrapper blade crushes with 90,000 kilograms of pressure.
Oh, I like my job. Just destroy it. Take the airplanes apart.
It takes 2 days to turn a plane like this into a pile of metal. But the MD-80, as big as it is a small job compared to the giant 747. A plane's remains may look like rubbish, but after some careful recycling, even they can be reused. Drivers take the metal to the Allied Metal Company in Chicago, where it's melted down. The challenge is to separate the aluminium from other pieces of scrap. A high-powered magnet rotates all the metal. The less magnetic aluminium rolls off, while iron sticks to the drum until it's moved over to its own bin. From here, they take the iron to its own smelter for recycling, while the clean aluminium heads to the furnace. Inside, gas-fired ovens heat the metal to temperatures up to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. In just 4 minutes, each 450 kilograms of scrap is molten aluminium. Workers pour the liquid metal into 550 kilogram molds, or 10 kilogram ingots. They'll make 5,000 to 6,000 of these high-grade metal bars from Aeroturbine's 747 and reclaim a total of 15,000 pounds. The mechanics have now gone inside, outside and up high to salvage valuable airplane parts. Now, for the first time, they look below. 5 sets of landing gear extend from the plane's underside and wings. They must be removed while keeping the plane up and balanced. But with so many components removed, the 747's balance is already off. Manager of maintenance Roger Hodges has a radical solution.
There's a lot of items removed from the airplane. So it is setting right now as tail heavy. So we'll take the tail off, throw the weight toward the nose.
Julio's shears can tear through 5-centimeter thick steel with one bite. And the mechanical jaws can open wide enough to crunch a ½ meter at a time. Julio makes an incision all the way around the tail. Then, it drops to the ground. The plane is stabilized with jacks, but it will soon only be supported by disposable railway sleepers in a makeshift system. Sledgehammers wedge the beams in as tight as possible. But some beams are rotten, and others not as solid as they'd hoped. No one knows how well they'll hold under the 747's enormous weight. If they fail, 90 tons of aircraft could crash to the ground with little warning, killing anyone underneath.
You got to make sure everything's level. You don't want these to start teetering, because if it's not level, and it's all it's going to do is start breaking its way down.
With all the supports firmly in place, the team has temporary peace of mind to remove the landing gear. The mechanics get to work removing the giant bolts, but it's not easy.
Down slow.
The weight of the plane is on those bolts, so they must lift and push from above, below and inside until those bolts have no pressure on them at all. Only then can they be undone.
This might take from 30 seconds to 3-4 hours. It just depends on what combination it takes to get it right. Luck of the draw. You just hit that sweet spot to get it to slide out and move on to the next one.
If the team can remove the landing gear safely, the 747 will be resting on jack supports. But if the jacks give way, the plane could dangerously crash to the ground.
Go, 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 go. Come on.
The team at Aeroturbine are close to scrapping an entire 747 jumbo jet. Having removed the many smaller parts, they still have the dangerous task of taking apart the plane's body. Removing the landing gear is a perilous and grueling process. But in 2 days, they've succeeded. Each set will be resold for a total of £25,000. The fuselage now rests solely on its jacks. Julio and his 2 colleagues now move into the plane. With the tail off, they have created one big door for removing different recyclables.
We separate everything. We separate the wire, the insulation, and the aluminum.
The 747's passenger cabin was more than double the size of any of its contemporaries when it was built in 1968. It stretches 6 meters across and encloses 850 cubic meters. The length of the Wright brothers' first flight in 1903 could have been performed within the economy section. Once they've removed the inside of this plane, they even stripped the 452 seats and set the metal aside for recycling. What's left of the fuselage looks ready to scrap, But there are unseen dangers. A serious safety hazard hides in the tail.
I need this move.
Heavy counterweights made of depleted uranium. In flight, they help stabilize the aircraft. But if they are not carefully removed, they could become radioactive.
You gotta leave enough room around the uranium, because it's fine, it's non-radioactive until you cut across it, and with the heat, it'll make it radioactive.
Environmental Health and Safety Manager, Anne-Marie Stilson, will send the depleted uranium to a licensed handler.
It's the good eco-conscious way to get rid of it, as opposed to just throwing it in a scrap metal pile. This is smelted down, and if it did get smelted down, it would cause radioactive activity, and it could get pretty serious.
So Lyle, here's your meter.
Another serious hazard may still sit in the giant fuel tanks.
So you have a little bit more.
They can hold 193,000 litres and must be completely empty of liquid and gas before scrapping begins. There is only one way to know for sure if they're clear: to crawl inside. It's a tight squeeze. But once inside, the sheer size of the 747 tanks is revealed.
These 47s are far roomier than what these guys are used to. Center tanks. You can stand in there.
Mechanic Lyle is 6'2" and can walk through the tanks with ease.
I'm in here checking out the levels inside the tank here with our sniffer that we have, checking the oxygen levels and the CO2 levels.
When Julio crushes this tank later in the demolition, sparks are bound to fly. Any residual fuel or fumes could cause an explosion. But after careful inspection,
And there's no fuel in here, it's dry.
Lyle gives it the all clear. What remains of the jumbo is now set to be crushed.
You gonna do that one?
This is a grand finale with a perilous edge. The mechanics must get their metal jacks out of the way one at a time. Soon, only the makeshift wooden jacks will support the aircraft, but they may not hold for more than a few seconds.
I'm going to loosen these jacks and pull it out real quick.
Well, I'm basically going to let the air out and run, because I don't know if it's going to fall or what it's going to do, so. Go.
With less and less support, the aircraft could come crashing down at any moment.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show no matter how it goes.
Each jack released makes the plane less stable. It is the most delicate procedure and extremely dangerous.
Go, 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 go. Come on. Come on, come on. Let's go, let's go.
The metal of the jumbo buckles as it settles on the makeshift towers. The railway sleepers creak, groan and splinter, but they eventually settle. The crew that spent the past 12 weeks pulling apart and recycling this plane can stand back and watch at a safe distance.
Awesome. That's awesome. I didn't think the shearing would hold that long. That did better than we expected.
But it must come down for workers to get underway with the next stage of recycling. So Julio Estrada moves in with his powerful hydraulic claw. And finally, Julio is only interested in the metal. He smashes out all the windows. Next, he slices through the length of the entire fuselage. Then flips over the top to reveal the center. As he extracts from the center of the plane, he separates metals into different piles of aluminium, steel, wire, and copper. The mechanics who labored on this 747 teardown over the past 12 weeks stand and watch the remains reduced to scrap.
Kind of felt good to mess it up. I usually fix them, you know.
Good airplane. Hated to see it go. All aircraft are different. All have their personalities, just like your car. But there's been airplanes that I've worked on over my years in this business that I would like to see crushed. So.
It takes Julio 8 days to complete the job, 4 times longer than a standard-sized aircraft. The once massive jet has been reduced to a 6-meter by 6-meter pile of junk. The price for this scrap metal, £15,000. That makes a total value of £3.4 million in recycled parts. For the owners, it's some compensation for losing a jetliner. The crew of mechanics have successfully taken apart their first 747 and met their biggest challenge ever.
Be careful, Lyle.
The engines they removed are already on another aircraft. Thousands of parts, small and large, are on their way back to service. The metal heads off to be melted down. They took away the waste and hazardous material, and no one was hurt. This 747 stopped flying after 24 years. But these mechanics have proven that with proper recycling, old aircraft never go to waste. Their parts will fly millions of us in years to come.
Next Tuesday at 8, we examine the sinking of the Titanic and her sister ship, the Britannic, and ask if the two disasters were linked. That's in Revealed.